Eli Lilly just out with news that its antibody cocktail for COVID treatment dramatically reduced the risk of hospitalization and death in a phase 3 trial. Joining us right now is Dr. Scott Gottlieb. He's the former FDA commissioner and a CNBC contributor, and he also serves on the boards of Illumina and Pfizer. And Dr. Gottlieb, really amazing news to hear this. It's already been authorized, but I think the big issue is people aren't using these drugs. I personally have tried to get a few people who have come down with COVID to go ahead and go in for this, and it's really complicated. It's hard to get the doctors to consider it, and people don't particularly want to go into a hospital to get an infusion, especially when it's early on and they aren't feeling all that sick. How do we get over some of that?
Yeah, that's all right. It's been difficult to get these drugs used. We made some mistakes in terms of how we distributed them. We distributed them through hospitals. They're really outpatient drugs, and we needed to figure out a way from the outset on how to distribute these drugs through outpatient clinics and outpatient settings. And there's also been reluctance among doctors. There's been a handful of thought leaders in the field who've been reluctant to promote the drugs, reluctant to prescribe the drugs, arguing that there wasn't enough evidence to support their use. I think all along there's been sufficient evidence in the setting of a crisis to support these drugs. We had evidence that they were effective. We know they're largely safe. There's a good theoretical basis on why antibody drugs should work in this setting. It's sort of well established in medicine and other settings with Ebola and other kinds of therapeutics that we've been able to develop against viruses. And so I think this is going to push it over the edge in terms of doctors now recognizing that these can provide a benefit. And some of the issues around the delivery are getting worked out, but it's unfortunate because a lot of people who could have been benefiting from these drugs probably didn't get them.
Is this a fixable problem? You think this is something that is going to jump those hurdles, especially the idea of thinking, okay, I'm going to make sure that I don't have to go to the hospital for COVID by going to the hospital now and getting an infusion?
Yeah, look, I think it is fixable. It's getting fixed. It's been slow, but, you know, it's hindsight's 2020. Looking back, these drugs would have been really beneficial at the peak of the epidemic when we didn't have a vaccine. You had a lot of high-risk individuals getting sick. Now you have fewer high-risk individuals getting sick because we are rolling out the vaccine. But there's still a place for these drugs. There's still people who could benefit from these drugs either because they didn't get vaccinated, they're at high risk and didn't get vaccinated, got infected, or even people who did get vaccinated who get symptomatic anyway, who are at high risk of a bad COVID outcome. These antibodies can still provide an additional benefit. So there's still a place for these drugs. I would expect them to be used. This data is fairly definitive now. There's now a rich body of data. All the trials we've turned over on these drugs have shown a benefit from these. It's not just the Lilly drug, also the Regeneron antibody. We were worried that we would lose these drugs as P1351, the Brazilian variant and the South African variant, became more prevalent. They haven't become that prevalent yet, so these drugs are still going to be effective against the strains that are circulating here in the United States.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.